I'm Garth McKenzie from traderscorner.co.za, and this is your once-a-week look at the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 indices. So as always, we start the show with a look at the S&P 500, and I'm going to zoom right out now and take a look at the weekly chart of the S&P 500 to begin with. And what you can see over here is what I mentioned last week, this big broadening pattern, or you can also call that a megaphone structure, continues to play out. You'll notice how that megaphone indicated by the blue trend lines at the lower end and at the upper end of the chart joins all the significant low points and the significant high points over the last 2.5 years. You'll see the upper end of that megaphone structure comes in at about 3,500 to 3,600. So if the S&P 500 can now break to a new high, which is looking quite likely, then I would suspect that that's where it's going. Probably going to head up into that 3,500 to 3,600 area, and that's where it then might begin to see a little bit of profit taking and perhaps stall slightly. If we then move on and zoom in a little bit more closer and take a look at the daily chart of the S&P 500, there you can see the recent trading activity over the last couple of months of this year. The upward trend is still very much intact. That market continues to make higher lows and higher highs. And obviously what is very topical right now is the fact that this market is knocking on the prior high that was seen in February of this year. If that high, which comes in at about 3,393, if that high can be broken, then I suspect we'll see the market push on and push up towards that 3,500 region that I alluded to on the previous slide. Let's then look a little bit more closely and zoom into the hourly chart here. And this one shows you the trading action over the last couple of weeks. But specifically what I'm focusing on here is this range that the S&P is trading in between 33.60 and 33.85. Now, that 33.85 has been quite a tough nut to crack over the last 2 weeks or so. The market continues to bump up against that level and hasn't been able to make any successful push through it as yet. But like I saw in a tweet earlier today, it's a bit like banging a sledgehammer against a wall. If you bang it enough times, eventually you break through. And that seems to be what the S&P 500 is trying to do here. It continues to make higher lows, which indicates that the buyers are active at the lower levels. And ultimately, if that remains the case, then one would expect that 33.85 area can be breached to the upside, and we could see the S&P 500 moving on to make new highs. Then let's look at the Nasdaq 100 index. And here we start with a look at the daily chart. This is a really beautiful looking chart, very, very well defined upward trend, a nice clear upward sloping channel over here. And you can see how that channel just contains the trading activity. Each time the market pulls back, there seems to be buying interest at the lower levels towards the bottom of that channel, and then it pushes up and continues to reach up for new all-time highs. So a very bullish chart setup here, and still nothing not to like about the Nasdaq 100 daily chart. And then let's take a look at our last chart for today, and this is zooming in on the Nasdaq. This is now an hourly chart of the Nasdaq 100 index, and what's evident here is the trading ranges that have been in play over the last couple of weeks. You can see through July traded in a nice broad range between 10,400 and up to 11,000. That 11,000 resistance was eventually broken to the upside in early August, and what often happens, as is the case here, is previous resistance becomes support on any further pullbacks. And that's exactly what happened. This market rallied up to 11,300. It pulled back, found support in the region around 11,000, a little bit of noise around that area in the middle of August. And it's now pushing up again. And once again, it's challenging that 11,300 area, which is overhead resistance. If the market can push out beyond 11,300, then that opens further blue sky territory for this market to actually go up and make new all-time highs. And it won't then be surprising to see the Nasdaq heading up towards 11,500 and possibly even beyond that level. That's all I've got for you this week. I'll be back again next week with another look at the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq indices.